Sorry about that. I realized that we weren't actually live on any of our streaming
I
channels.
know. I was hitting refresh on the
Oh, God. Sorry. Can you see my video, though, still?
I can.
Woohoo! All right. We'll do a second quick restart to the episode, and you missed about 5 minutes of us just talking. This is episode 100 of the Armchair Producers. We're currently talking about this week's chain movie, which is Lost in Translation. So carry on, please, Travis. You were talking about a better in-depth explanation as to what was going on in for the story.
We have two characters here who are at a loose end in their lives, who aren't really sure what's next for them in very different life stages for them, and they feel they're in this beautiful, luxurious hotel in Tokyo, and they almost seem trapped by it. They almost seem to be prisoners of their own, inertia in this hotel. That's not the right word, but. I really want to use a wanky word here, but I can't really sure if I'm going to pronounce it correctly because it's been a long time since I actually used it. But I want to say, so I won't because I think I'm going to get it wrong. But they're both sort of at this sort of emo-ish stage of their life where they don't want to go out and explore the city, which is funny because I think I've actually kind of experienced that a little bit while traveling before. That you look out the window at this incredible city around you and you're kind of like, I think I'm going to stay here in the hotel and watch Ratchet or Unbound or something.
Because you've been to Tokyo, haven't you?
Yeah, a couple of times.
So I guess my question, because I haven't been, does this movie kind of capture the vibe and feel of Tokyo as well?
It really does. And I actually ended up very much enjoying that aspect of the picture. I guess where a film really comes alive and where some people, I guess they could sort of say this is boring. And I think I'd lump them in for the same people who've been saying WandaVision is boring. In the sense that they've forgotten how to enjoy things that aren't instant gratification. But once Bob and Charlotte actually come together in the hotel and start to get to know each other, and I guess one would say bond and become friends, they start to go out and explore the city a little bit together. It's almost like finding each other frees them from being prisoners in this hotel, and they almost feel free to actually go out and experience the city. And I really did get that feeling that it was a very reminiscent feeling of when I was in Tokyo for the first time. Just how weird it is. What a weird place, and it's how foreign yet so familiar it can feel. Because there's cars and roads and familiar brands, like it was walking across the Shibuya crossing. You can clearly see the Starbucks, but at the same time, then they go running through pachinko parlors and then karaoke and stuff like that. And it's just in the weird conversations you have with Japanese people who want to practice their English while talking to you, and trying to really be polite and then pretend you understand what they're saying when you've got no idea, because they're just so nice. I really did evoke a really strong feeling of what it's like to be a foreigner in Japan. It's a very novel experience, and in a way, I have a slight criticism of a film on that front, in the sense it kind of felt like to me at times it was trading in Japanese cliches and stereotypes. It kind of felt like and I have a fairly strong feeling that Sophia Copolla wrote this based on personal experiences. The word on the street is the character of Charlotte was very loosely based on her, and Giovanni Ribisi's character was based loosely on her husband at the time, Spike Jonze. What a talented pair that was. And ironically, two directors who I thought I would see a lot more of in the 21st century than I have. So I feel like this is, and I know this. So this is the scene in the bar with the redheaded singer. That singer is someone that Sophia Coppola saw singing in Tokyo and decided she wanted in the film, and had to go track down later to get in this film. So it's based on her experiences. And I don't feel like I, having only spent a couple of months there over 2 trips, feel qualified to write anything more than a story that would scratch the surface of Japanese culture. And I feel like anything I would write based on my experiences there would be a little bit superficial and insulting. And I feel like at times that's what the Japanese side of the story kind of does actually feel like that to me. It kind of feels like, tourists' first experience of Tokyo. And and I'm not sure. It's a little bit like the Kirsten Dunst did record a song once called Hello Kitty. Yes, she sings. And I highly encourage everyone to look it up on YouTube. Hello Kitty? No, so that was Avril Lavigne recorded a song called Hello Kitty. Kirsten Dunst recorded a cover of Turning Japanese, potentially the world's greatest ever song about masturbation. I'm not lying.
No, I know, that's why I'm laughing.
And they both sort of deal in these superficial, cliches about Japan, kawaii culture, pachinko parlors, arcades, yada, yada, yada. So while I did get the feeling of like, when that moment where Scarlett Johansson's wandering around through the arcade watching the guy playing with the drums on the arcade machine, I watched friend of the show, Patria, playing Let It Go on one of those things once, the Frozen song. And I was like, I remember what it was like being in one of those arcades, because as a Gen Xer, you're kind of like, remember arcades
back in the day.
But
I kind of agree with you. It does feel like almost a creature of 2 movies that you never actually get to see the other one. It does feel like a kind of a genuine slice of the tourist experience of Tokyo, but that world is not necessarily all that Tokyo is. That's kind of the world that tourists are shown. You really don't see anything of a day-to-day life of someone living and working in Tokyo, because you've got this person who's just living on the dime of her husband, who's bored and going around and seeing tourist things, and you've got a bored former movie celebrity who is, as soon as he gets to the hotel, everyone is meeting him and shaking hands, bowing, and doing that very, very high level hospitality and customer service kind of thing, which is not how people generally treat one another. So it's like almost like the public face of the tourist board of Tokyo that you're seeing here, which a lot of people go and do experience that's kind of what they want to see. They don't want to see the everyday life of it, but you get these little nuggets of it, like just the real conversations that we're witness to of Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson when they have their night out, and they're kind of in these sort of like trendy bars and things like that. It's like, okay, these are genuine moments that people have. They do get dressed up to go out into these nice places to kind of experience that higher life. But you don't really get anything of, I guess, repercussions or ramifications for any of the characters in this movie or the world. It's very much this kind of surface level thing that I think the way that we are introduced to both our lead characters is kind of the point of it. They're both bored with what they're surrounded by. They're both, that one of the first interactions that they have is Bill Murray saying to her, I'm planning a prison break. And she says, okay, I'm in. And then the next time they meet, so like, we're going out. And it kind of does almost feel a little bit like a prison break movie, but for the soul rather than a literal kind of getting out of this legitimate space.
And I kind of feel there's an element of white privilege in here. I know it's just getting a little bit more political perhaps than we intended. But in the sense that you have to, one has to acknowledge their white privilege when they're in Japan, I think. There is a privilege that applies to you. It's the only place I've actually had someone give me the finger because I was white. And it's probably the only place I've ever been where it was very obvious I wasn't from around there, right? So, where you'll be in bars and people will walk past and go, Gajin, which I've always said, if someone that did that in Australia wanted past someone in a bar they thought wasn't Australian and said, foreigner.
Yeah.
That would be not cool, but apparently that's not so uncool in Japan to call someone a foreigner. I wasn't offended. I was quite amused, but the white privilege in the sense that like Scarlett Johansson can just wander into an Ikebana class and have someone start showing him how to do Japanese flower arrangement. And they can just sort of waltz through Japanese society and everybody can give them a pass and go, they're white, right? They don't know anything about what's going on.
Yeah.
So that occurred to me a little bit as well. Despite of it, I still enjoyed the journey through Japanese culture because I'd done it myself.
Yeah.
But the fact that the film just kind of scoots through on tourist mode is a weakness of the film, I think.
I think
where it comes into its own, though, I think, is in the performances and in the relationship between Charlotte and Bob. It's so
100%
intelligently done. You do not see films made like this, not in the early 2000s, certainly not now, and I think they're rare.
Yeah, 100%. This is, as we've talked about a few times through our chain movies, a lot of these movies have ended up being very obvious kind of character-driven pieces, and this is entirely a character-driven piece where we are they slowly reveal themselves to us through some of the very best. It almost feels kind of unscripted, and I wouldn't be surprised given Bill Murray's
legacy.
You're right.
Apparently, many scenes were very loosely scripted and was sort of like they given a rundown on what was happening.
Yeah.
But in terms of dialogue, a lot of it was left up to, especially Bill Murray, to actually improv.
Yeah, and I think that that shines through because it does feel very organic. All of the conversations and the way that he's kind of joking but polite with all of his handlers whenever he's kind of stepping off of a elevator and things like that. It screams very Bill Murray, but it also is very in line with the character. And Scarlett Johansson, this is still relatively early into her career. This was before this was right at the point of her exploding on the scene of Hollywood. And she
was 17 when this was made, by the way.
Yeah. And she keeps up with Bill Murray, which is pretty good. That's pretty good accolade, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I watched a little interview of it she did on the Howard Stern show talking about this, and she sort of notes how difficult it was at sort of points to. I think it's well known Bill's not easy to work with, and I suspect she was trying to find a very polite way to say that in this interview, that he was a bit tricky to work with, but especially if not for no other reason than he was an extraordinarily experienced actor at that point, a real movie star.
Yeah,
as opposed to Scarlett being 17. She had done some work as a young person. But really before this, I think her big breakout for me was Ghost World, which came out in 2001. So just a couple of years before this, she was, as you sort of say, she was right on the cusp of stardom. But working opposite a genuine, movie icon like Bill Murray would have been intimidating for sure.
Hell yeah. And
she sort of notes she doesn't. When you realize that Bill's improving a lot of his stuff, the way that she responds to it is really impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of heartfelt, but at the same time, still very much in keeping with the kind of character that we're presented through these long periods where it's just her or just him in their rooms doing nothing, not really saying much. This could almost play like a silent movie for half of it because nothing of actual consequence is really spoken. It's all just bullshit that everyone's talking, and everything that kind of feeds into Bill Murray's distant wife, you literally see it. So like the faxes that come through and stuff like that. It could kind of play as a silent movie for a great portion of it.
And maybe that's what I enjoy about it. I always like Seinfeld. And that was supposedly a show about nothing. I think you learn a lot about these characters before they start doing stuff together. And I kind of enjoy that, to a chance to actually sit down, spend half an hour getting to know our two characters before what passes for adventure starts. And what is the adventure? The adventure is forming a human relationship with somebody else, which I suspect might not have happened for a long time for either of them for various reasons. I mean, Scarlett said yes, less time. She was so young, but and in a way, I don't know. Like it's been described as a romantic melancholy. I don't know that I felt. I know when I walked out of this the first time, I didn't feel like I'd seen a romantic movie or romance. I didn't feel like Bill Murray and Charlotte and Bob's relationship was a romantic one. I almost felt like what I'd seen form between the two of them was almost a incredibly powerful platonic bond. Now, that's open for interpretation. There is a very awkward kiss in the lift, and then there's the hug at the end where he says something. But I don't know. I wonder, what did you think?
I never really saw the romantic side of it. It is a very, very close bond that they develop, and it's something that I've got a sort of association with or experience with when I was traveling around Europe. Stuff. There were people that I would be just randomly be in the hostels with, and I'd have these deep, meaningful, very honest, open conversations, and we wouldn't really kind of talk about or introduce ourselves. It would just be sitting there in the dining hall or whatever, or in the bar, just having a drink, and we'd just start talking about it. So like, you know what I did? And you just have this kind of instant fast friendship that means so much in the moment while you're there, and then you kind of drift away. I am of the opinion that these two had this very, very intense platonic travelers bond, I guess, and probably didn't think about each other too often, or just every now and then, like whenever they happen to see something about Tokyo, they go, oh yeah, I remember that. They were a highlight for me. I remember Charlotte. I remember Bob. But the big thing for me, the tag that I find kind of hard to really quantify is this is qualified as a comedy. And yes, there are funny elements, but I don't know if it really warrants a true tag of comedy.
Comedy is a very broad description, though.
Yeah, but
I can get it. I mean, there are some genuine laughs in here. It's amusing in parts.
It's kind of. I think that a lot of the comedy for me comes through with a lot of the stereotypical stuff, like the smash to shot of Bill Murray being head and shoulders taller than everyone else in the elevator, or the shower not quite reaching high enough for him, those kinds of things. And
going on a Japanese game TV show, that was, in fact, I think some of my favorite moments in this film were just the two of them sitting there watching Japanese TV, because you're like, yeah, I did that. And, and Japanese TV is it's a
different breed.
It's a lot. It's really part of the experience is sitting in your hotel room, because there are no, generally speaking, at least in my experience, most of the hotels I stayed in did not have any English language programming at all, not even CNN, which is pretty much the standard no matter where you're going around. Most hotels have like a Bloomberg or a CNN or something talking about stocks and business, but you end up just flipping through Japanese channels of these bizarre talk show, light entertainment things that sort of been very, very popular over there, or sumo wrestling. Both seem to be the two things I had to choose from. And it's an experience in of itself. So I very much enjoyed those scenes, and I found them amusing because they said a lot about their reactions without necessarily saying anything.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. But I think that this was a real great display of, especially coming off of the really melancholy drama of Virgin Suicides, coming into this, Sophia Copolla really showed that she has the capability to do a lot of range, a lot of variation of storytelling, and especially going from an adapted screenplay book about suicide to an effervescent, loosely scripted comedy about nothing. That's kind of the polar opposite of what you've just come from. So I think she was really stretching herself, and she proved herself very worthy.
She pulled it off tremendously well. I enjoyed this every bit, if not more, than I think I did 20 years ago. She won an Oscar for this, by the way.
Yeah.
I think being the first woman to win that, or certainly one of the first few. I mean, I just had to pull up on one scene in this film, but I actually talked about in my other podcast, The Throwback, available now on Spotify. And we were reviewing last night, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Don't ask. Do not ask. And interestingly, in that film, we star Sarah Jessica Parker. There's a scene where she's in her bedroom watching television or fucking something, I don't know. And she's just hanging around in her underpants and like a singlet. And both my co-hosts, Susie and I, were looking at each other when we watched it going, that doesn't really seem legit. Like, when her brother walks in and goes, hey, blah, 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 here's some plot exposition. And you're like, yeah, nah, I don't reckon you're getting around in your underpants like that, and your door open and shit, like, just because you're a hot teenage girl, right? Like, that seems kind of male gazy. Anyway, I was actually, g'day. I think it's Juan in the chat there. I think, g'day, Juan.
Hey, Juan.
And there's a scene. The opening scene of this film, I actually referenced this in last night's show, is basically a close-up on Scarlett Johansson's bum.
Yeah.
And in semi-see-through underpants, which apparently Sophia Copolla, to make her feel comfortable, had to do it herself first. Which is a nice little move. Quentin Tarantino jumps cars. She wears underpants. But what I found interesting about it was you sort of go, I remember this scene because, it was memorable. And, you sort of look at it for a second, it's just you're basically focusing on this young girl's bum. And you're like, okay, that's a bit racy. That's a bit sexist. That's not really, would that fly today? And you go, hang on a second though. This is a female writer-director.
Yeah.
This isn't by accident. She's not doing this by accident. Like, this is not Zack Snyder directing Sucker Punch, right? Like, of his masturbatory fantasy of what girls do when they're in an asylum together. It's an actual woman who's done this, and I really liked it. Because when you stop and think about it for a second, the scene just hangs there, and then it hangs there, and then it hangs there for a bit longer. 38 seconds that shot takes of her bum. And you start to feel really uncomfortable about, this scene. You're like, okay, I've seen it. It's a very nice bottom. Can we move? Oh, no, we're staying on that scene. I really enjoyed that she's sort of telling us something about the male gaze right there, and filmmaking as a whole, male filmmakers sort of focusing on that kind of thing. Because I also watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again this week. And again, there's another Tarantino does that in the scene as well. He sort of sits there looking at Margaret Qualley's ass for about 30 seconds, and you're like, no, I don't like that. But here we go. I mean, Sophia was a really interesting way to open the film.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that it opened up on the bum, but it was completely out of context to everything, and it was just this shot of a very lovely bum on a bed, and then eventually just this little bit of music comes in, and the title comes up, and then it fades away. So like, that's it. So like, okay, that's definitely a title card people will remember. But it also kind of speaks to the character of Charlotte as well. Everyone has had those moments where they're bored, depressed, lethargic, and they just lie on the bed doing nothing in their undies. And it's like, yep, I know exactly how that person is feeling by just
I think I
lying.
did that for about 3 days in New York City once and just watched Law and Order reruns on telly. So it was a genuine pleasure to see a film on this intelligent, slow, creative storytelling.
Yeah.
Now I think you get to pick because I picked this.
I do, but we do have a unique opportunity here. So I will just posit this live. We are on episode 100. Do we want to keep doing chain movies? It does offer us a nice versatility and variety, but we can also end it or start a new chain or whatever.
It has been going for about a year now, but
yeah,
I like it. I think it actually, otherwise, it actually adds a bit of direction to this, in the sense that, like, otherwise it's just kind of like we've tried a few different approaches.
How dare you? How dare you have uniformity?
We had seasons for a while where we did like a whole bunch of Steve Gutenberg films. And that just all seemed a bit random. This kind of does add a little bit of it adds a bit of conformity and direction, and we know, it's a random direction, but each week we're picking a different direction.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so how did we even get here? Oh, it was Edward. That's right. Yes, Bill Murray. There we go. It's hard to keep track sometimes. So, well, I am going to take us. I'm going to use someone we haven't mentioned at all, except just one passing reference to Giovanni Ribisi. So he's a talented actor who just pops up in some unusual projects.
Someone else I expected to see a lot more of this century, but really, really haven't.
Yeah, but we're going to go with Giovanni Ribisi, and we are going to go to The Gift.
Okay.
This is a Sam Raimi joint from a few years ago. And it stars Cate Blanchett. It has got obviously Giovanni Ribisi. It's got Greg Kinnear, Katie Holmes, Keanu Reeves. It's even got J.K. Simmons in it as well as the sheriff, which I totally forgot about. It's an interesting little...
The Gift, you say?
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
If I think of a Joel Edgerton film, you're going back 20 years here.
Yeah. So this is an...
Oh, I remember this thing. This thing's a giant pile of shit.
But it does afford a lot of interesting...
There's a lot of places to go.
And it was written by Billy Bob Thornton as well.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, so it's an interesting creature to go to. Hilary Swank, Michael Jeter, Kim Dickens, Gary Cole.
Yeah.
So that is where we're going. It's not the worst movie in the world.
No, it was just like, I remember when it came out, we're sort of expecting a lot of it, and you're like, that was kind of crappy, but not, Revenge of a Teenage Vixen from Outer Space crappy.
That's true, and not Death Machine crappy.
No, well, I don't think we've plunged anywhere near those depths since.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I did watch Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
You're just torturing yourself for no reason there,
I didn't pick that. It was on the wheel.
Yeah. Never trust a wheel. We had a wheel of Heigl, and that was just 100%
We only used it once.
Fortunately.
We should watch Airplane. Thank you, Miss Foxy B.
Welcome back, Foxy.
No, that was a different Fox. That was Fox Pixar something or other. It's but I know this, and Airplane is it's called fucking Flying High in this country.
No, but everywhere else in the world it's called Airplane, which makes more sense anyway.
The Gift, you should check it out. Yes. I think it might be on Amazon in Australia. I'm not sure, but
I'll do a quick check. Hang on.
It's a bit hard sometimes. Like I said, make sure you get the 2000 version here and not the 2015 version. I think was the Joel Edgerton film.
Correct. Yeah.
Also, actually, I would say it's a better film than the 2000 film, but unfortunately, Giovanni Ribisi isn't in it. And
so we may have difficulty getting The Gift legally because it apparently is not available on any streaming services, and you can't even rent or buy it. But
That's a bit silly.
yes, but
We do endeavour to do things legally where we can, but
Yeah.
I mean, as my usual argument goes, if you're not going to let me buy it,
between the two of us, I think we're probably signed up to pretty much every streaming service available in Australia. And if that isn't enough money to get it, what are we going to do?
get your studio shit together. Though sometimes it is interesting that some of the quirks that these little films go through. I think I talked a while ago about there was a film I read about with Chris O'Dowd in it, which actually is never getting released.
Oh,
literally completed, but for some reason, for insurance purposes, it was the insurance company paid out on it. I don't fully understand it, but they basically destroyed the print.
How strange!
Because that was considered, that if the insurance company had to pay out, then that was they weren't going to let anybody ever see it, which seems a bit strange. But
it seems strange that I mean, a Chris O'Dowd movie gets destroyed, and yet you're still able to get movies that are unequivocally entirely wrong in so many ways. Birth of a Nation and things like that. There's copies still available and stuff like that. It seems so bizarre in this modern world that there are movies that don't get released. But, legal things are the legal things, I guess.
Yes, in a way, if, it never aired anywhere. Now, if I'm wrong, people, I'm sure I read that somewhere. I can't remember the name of the film. But if you think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. And
hello, Chewy Southpaw. Welcome.
Welcome, Chewy. I welcome back. It's been a calmer couple of weeks in your neck of the woods, hopefully. We're talking about films that get destroyed by insurance companies. Anyway, as we do. But yes, it is frustrating that you can't. There are certain films you still can't access. But what I was trying to get to the point.
How dare you?
Was that sometimes that's why these films can't be like, let's say the original film distributor went broke and it's not clear who owns the rights. And these, I always tell the story when I went to the Melbourne Film Festival, got to be 15 years ago. They had a special on George Romero's films. He was the focus was on him, and he was a guest of a festival, and I sat right behind him at a screening of Dawn of the Dead, which was pretty fucking exciting.
Not bad.
But the thing is that they came out there to talk, and the festival people were like, we went to the film's distributors and we offered to pay on our dime to make a new print, to get a new print made of the original, the original negative of the film, and they said no.
It's so weird. I get why some things just aren't available for certain reasons at certain times, like the acquisition of Fox by Disney. Fox had distribution rights and streaming rights to all the different streaming services while they were still their own independent entity, and they would obviously be locked up for multiple years. Is one of the reasons why things like Deadpool are only just kind of about to be introduced to the new subdivision of Disney Plus, which is Disney Plus Star, which is going to be all the adult content stuff, which I think we talked about last week. We're probably going to see if there's going to be a new movie or TV show, The Punisher, that's probably where it's going to live because no one wants a PG Punisher. So timelines and things will expire eventually, and then they will get consolidated in different places. But it's one of the benefits of Disney is the fact that they are owning everything themselves. They will be able to showcase everything eventually. Whereas Warner Brothers, they don't really care about that. And their HBO Max service is not available anywhere but the US. And they still have these long-standing rights agreements with Fox and all of that stuff. 1 second.
I think the dog wants to be let in. So this is the annual or weekly tradition on the show where the dog is allowed into the room. That's Archimedes. He's George. I'm Mr. Colin. Welcome to the show.
Yes. So now, shall we move on to our next recurring segment?
Yes, let's talk about WandaVision.
WandaVision. Now, advanced warning for anyone who has not seen episode 5. We will be talking about it now, so shut us off for 15, 20 minutes as we talk about it. But most people seem to be watching it, and now that it has taken on, included more of the more up-to-date or more in line with normal MCU, more people are watching it, I think, now. Because it certainly seems to be that people who didn't like the first couple of episodes are going, oh yeah, I really like it now. It's like, okay, late on the train, bastards.
As long as they got there, I guess we should just be happy. But this is also this new episode is called On a Very Special Episode. Wanda addresses Vision's worries as he grows suspicious of the neighbor's strange behavior. And things are starting to get pretty fucked up in Westview.
Yes.
Westview. We learned last week, we saw what's going on outside. We've got SWORD doing their thing with scientists and you've been doing sciencey stuff. And they've picked up the TV recording of the TV show that's going on in the sitcom. They've tried to infiltrate, and we saw how far that got them with Monica given the boot. We saw the guy try and get in through the drains, and that didn't have any more success. This week they tried a drone. That didn't really go well for them either.
No, it did not. But this is definitely one of those, I guess, in many ways you'd kind of simile this episode, because it is episode 5 out of 9 for this current season, if it is just going to be going on for more. But this is like the almost equatable to like the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, where it was that mid-season, so like, what the fuck, shit all coming together, and you are getting tantalizing suggestions of where the story could go next, explanations of why the show has been the way it has been. And I am so happy how this is going. I predicted a lot of the development of this, and I particularly predicted the cameo that happens at the end.
I think we all knew it was coming, though.
Yeah. I mean, there were rumors that he was going to be there, but I predicted this before those rumors came out, before episode 1. I'm a very smart boy. Give me my moment, damn it.
I heard it called like a $77.4 billion cameo or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I enjoyed very much seeing Wanda almost become a bad guy. In this scene where she sort of broke character and walked out and told the SWORD guys what was what. And then there was a scene, also a scene when she almost goes head to head with Vision himself, when he, they both sort of rise up and sort of stare each other down. That would be a fight for the ages, those two.
Yeah, it's, there's enough going on. There's sort of like suggestions that this is kind of a retelling of the House of M comic series, which is a fantastic comic series. I don't know whether they're going to do it, because they've done a lot of inspired by comics in the MCU. There's like the alcoholism / self-destructive nature of Tony Stark in Iron Man 2/3. They didn't go as deep and dark in that, and there's kind of the Ant-Man characters of the original Ant-Man. He was a horrible wife beater in a number of comics, and they show that he's not a good dad, and he wasn't necessarily the best husband in the world, but they definitely skirt away from that. So I don't know how close to House of M they're going to stick with what goes on, but if they stick with this as a story of a superhero not being able to cope with the death of a loved one, and giving them the legitimate reason why they would turn bad, Wanda and her fucking powers could be a huge bad guy. She could end up becoming the new bad guy for Phase 4. because much like how in the Batman Chris Nolan movies, at the end of the first movie, we had Gary Oldman saying, "Oh, what about escalation?" And of course, you got the Joker as the main bad guy in the second one, and then you got Bane, and it's the escalation of psychological warfare versus literal physical warfare of the third one. You had one very, very physical, domineering bad guy in Thanos for the first 10 years of MCU. You can't do that again. It would feel very boring, and you don't have 10 years worth of build-up to satisfy that for the audiences. So you need to go a different way, which is one of the reasons why it seems like everything that we're hearing about the new phase is a lot darker, it's a lot more twisted, and the fact that this is the first thing that we're being presented with, and it is dealing with a lot more difficult stuff, like the death of the puppy that turns up, the fact that Wanda is at the bare minimum surface level, she is doing all of this out of grief for losing Vision in Endgame or Infinity War. It's all a lot darker stuff than what they've been traditionally using as material in the MCU, and the fact that they are bringing up stuff that goes out elsewhere, I doubt that they will go as dark as I want them to, but I'm really enjoying what they're doing so far, so I'm in it for...
I'd like to quiz Juan here. Juan says, I rewatched all of it, and episode 5 at the end is the only part of it I enjoyed. Are you saying, Juan, that you only enjoyed that part of episode 5, or the end of episode 5 was the only part of a series you've enjoyed so far? The other thing, I mean, I read an article yesterday called All the Easter Eggs that you've missed in the series so far. And there are, I guess, for better for worse, all sorts of different things they're sort of referencing and setting up there. One thing that I thought was interesting was a indication of a character called the Grim Reaper, whose helmet appears in a scene, an animated scene in the show. And I think he's the kind of guy who could be a villain who has a long history with the Avengers. Potentially could be something they could use. I'm with you. It could definitely, the way, if you think back to Age of Ultron, which we've talked. I mean, interesting how central that film's become now. That Wanda was actually kind of set up as a villain in that. She was just under the control or influence of Hydra at the time. But I always felt like I felt pretty unsatisfied. One of many unsatisfying things about that film was how easily Wanda and Pietro sort of just changed sides and went over to join the Avengers. It didn't seem like you kicked your ass a couple of times, but in the end, she wasn't really much of a threat to the Avengers because they managed to bring her on side pretty quickly. So, it would be an interesting setup. I mean, there's so many things they could do, but I mean, the introduction of Pietro is thought. I mean, we don't know what it is now, but I mean, it looks like it's the introduction of mutants to the MCU. So it's the introduction. Essentially, he is the entry point, the spike protein, if you will, of the X-Men characters into the MCU. So
I did appreciate the fact that obviously because the show within the show keeps on jumping forwards decades, that the decade that they were on was also queued up with the time period of those movies as well. So it's like, okay, I like that. That's fair. The last time we saw him was in the 90s interpretation of the X-Men, and he turns up in the very Full House inspired kind of introduction and way that the episode is kind of displayed to us.
I guess what question for you? One thing we used to do a long time ago. You got naked pictures of Kevin Feige. I hand you the keys to the MCU. But they do tell you we now want to introduce the mutants however we're going to do it. Okay, the next Avengers film is the X-Men versus the Avengers. Do you recast the main X-Men characters, or do you try and bring across as many existing McKellen, James McAvoy, Patrick Stewart, Hugh Jackman, those guys. Do you try and get as many of a recognized X-Men stars into that picture?
I think that they're potentially going to I think that there was an article I read online, and I think they're absolutely right. Marvel and DC are kind of in another arms race. They were previously in a bit of an arms race for the fact that Thanos was making his true appearance the same year that he potentially, before it turned out to be Steppenwolf, going to be the bad guy in Justice League. And that was a bit controversial because Thanos was created after Darkseid was created. So the DC character came before the Marvel character, and the Marvel character made it to screen first and was much better portrayed, let's be honest. And now we're in a position where everything we're hearing about the Flash movie, there's multiple Batmans and things like that, and they're going to be going across different universes and things like that, and it feels like they're kind of doing the same thing again in the MCU, where I think that they are doing this, the fact that it's not the same Pietro that we saw in Ultron, the fact that it was from a different universe, shall we say, it just instantly opens up the door that that's a thing. That's a thing that can happen. So they can pick and choose, and they can go, all right, how much is it going to take to get Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, James McAvoy, Hugh Jackman, and all of those people back? Can we get them? Do they want to do it? Yes, no. All right, let's move on. Let's recast. Let's recast and get another person in as a younger Wolverine so that we can
end up. Can you do that? If I can get Ian McKellen, James McAvoy, James Marsden, I don't know. Kelsey Grammer wants to come back as Beast. I don't know. I can get all those guys, or I can get Stuart McAvoy, let's say, and sorry, McKellen, and get rid of Anna Paquin. Yes, she's fine.
She was never a good
guys. Is it all or nothing? Can you cast? I don't know. Who was that guy who played Han Solo as
Alden Ehrenreich.
You cast Alden Ehrenreich as Wolverine or something, and try and just don't mention the war.
I think that they have a very important character that can play with that more than anything else in the DC canon. And unless potentially DC was to bring in Plastic Man, the only character that can really do it for DC is Plastic Man because of his broken brain. For Marvel, they have got Deadpool, where he has already name-checked the two different actors playing Xavier within the Fox universe. So the fact that he is being brought in, he is going to be continued on as part of the MCU. He is the only person that can be that literal member of the audience that goes, oh, wow, this is so confusing. You don't know you, but you two, I know you two because I was at the bar. And he can be that bridge, and he can kind of write people out through witty comedy if they want him to. And I think that they could potentially use that as an option for getting rid of some of the characters that are sort of like, okay, well, James Marsden, we didn't really get a chance to see him truly take on this Cyclops character. The guy that was Cyclops in the young X-Men movies didn't really do anything. We can just write out Cyclops and we can start a new one, and there can be a silly line about, oh my god, a third Cyclops, this is stupid. How do you have three Cyclopses? Is that one Cyclops? Do we have to call you Triclops now or something?
That's in the He-Man movie. Triclops was a He-Man character.
Exactly. There's the next carryover. But something like that, and then it's like, okay, business as usual, carry on. They have a lot of avenues where they can play with this. If they are even going to try and unify the universes, because they could very well just keep them as different universes, and you've got two characters that can jump from one to another, three, kind of. You got Wanda, who can obviously bring characters from other universes in some way, shape, or form. You've got Doctor Strange, who can travel to the different universes, as is very evident through his performances, and the fact that it's the Multiverse of Madness is his sequel. And you've got Deadpool, who is capable of breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the audience about it. They've got plenty of options to keep them all or delete them. And it would be really funny if they did delete them, because they would be able to bring Crisis of Infinite Earths to the screen before DC does, really.
I really hope that's on. I hope that's on their agenda somewhere. I really do. Like, I mean, someone's whiteboards. Because I mean, if anyone can do it, Marvel can. They've proven they've got the runs on the board.
Absolutely,
it'd be fascinating to see where they go next from here. I enjoyed this episode very much.
Yeah, me too.
But I've enjoyed all of them, so that's a shock to anybody who's a regular listener.
How dare you have a consistent thought?
It's just so deep and well thought out. And I also enjoyed my friend who I watched the episode of this week's WandaVision with did point out it was interesting to see Elizabeth Olsen appearing in a show very heavily influenced by Full House, which of course starred her sisters, and we were kind of like, would it be cool if they made a cameo? But we should be so lucky.
It would, it could be just a blink and you miss them in the background. They're part of just residents of Westview. That's all.
Or something like that. It would be interesting. I assume they're too busy smoking crack or something to get involved in anything as piddly as a TV show like.
Well,
they actually own the house that Heath Ledger died in.
It's their fault, obviously.
Interesting, but they don't seem to act anymore.
I don't think that's interesting. I was never found them interesting.
Oh, harsh.
Sorry.
Smoking crack. That would be why.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we move
Before
on?
we get sued, let's move on.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about occupation, or shall I just have?
Not really, but I will.
All right. So, what's Occupation?
Occupation is a film you can find in Australia, at least on the Netflix, and it is an Australian action science fiction drama.
Okay.
It is a very rare combination of things. You do not see many Australian science fiction films at all. You don't see genre cinema in Australia at all, really. An odd horror film here or there, but Mad Max is probably the only one I can, the most obvious choice. And is that science fiction? Kinda. Anyway, Occupation, made in 2018. A small group of town residents have to band together after a devastating ground invasion. As they struggle to survive, they realize they must stay one step ahead of their attackers and work together for a chance to strike back. I agree, Chewy, by the way. Mad Max is just, it's shit, and I can't wait to see what George Miller does with Anya Taylor-Joy in the Furiosa spin-off. It's going to be fun. Now, hopefully, he gets to make it here.
Quick point of clarification here, Travis. Is this Occupation Rainfall or the 2018 Occupation?
2018 Occupation. Occupation Rainfall is the sequel to this, which has just come out and is playing in cinemas here in Australia.
Okay.
And I saw that getting billboards and stuff.
Yeah.
Around the city. And you're like, again, that's an interesting thing about the world we're in now, the fact that this would never have got anywhere near a multiplex in this country. Maybe one or two screens somewhere, but it would never get billboards on the side of a freeway under normal circumstances. But here we are. So in a way, that's a good thing. So Occupation, the original, which is on Netflix, is directed by Luke Spark. Never done anything else of interest or note that I've ever seen. Probably the only notable star in this is Tamira Morrison.
Mr. Boba Fett.
Mr. Boba Fett. He was, of course, in the wonderful New Zealand film Once Were Warriors. He was also Tom Curry in Aquaman.
Yes, he was. Yes.
He gets around. There, Australians might recognise a couple other faces in here.
Yeah, there's a few that I recognise. Yeah,
a couple of them have been in, Home and Away. I think the long running, soap opera.
We've got Bruce Spence. Speaking of Mad Max,
didn't even recognise him, but yeah, Aaron Jeffries, someone who's been in stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was him, by the way, and I think you might recognise Mr. Jeffrey because he was in The Interview, which we watched last year with Hugo Weaving.
Oh,
he was the young tough cop, right?
Yeah.
And the other name in here, I guess Aussies might recognise is the fabulous Jacqueline Mckenzie, probably best known for her role in Romper Stomper back in the 90s.
Holy shit! Yeah.
We got to try and find a reason to watch that. That's really good.
It is a good one.
But anyway, all of these wonderful, well-known sort of Australian actors. One reasonably well-known international star. A fair amount of money on it. The special effects in this are reasonable.
Okay.
Adds up to significantly less than the sum of its parts. This film is a giant fucking turd of a movie. Like, this film fucking sucks. It has a 4.8 on IMDb. It has a 45 Metascore. Both are generous.
Okay.
You have no idea what a trial it was to get through this fucking thing. I tell you what. The script is so badly written. It's written by Luke Spark as well as Felix Williamson. And Felix being one of the actors in the film. And it's so full of cliche and tired tropes. The actors are forgettable to a person. And I don't know if that's... Well, none of them are good, but they're certainly not helped by the script. The script is, I mean, even if they were good, the script would have probably held them back. Like, you kind of go... you basically go, okay, it's Tamara Morrison and the others. And there's the Asian chick who is played by Stephanie Jacobson, who looks very familiar for some reason, but I can't place her anywhere. It's a mess. It's a mess of a story, which is a real shame because it had some interesting ideas. I think the idea of an alien invasion film in Australia is, to me at least, an interesting idea. An idea of an alien invasion film that doesn't focus on the US president trying to blow up a mothership and, today we celebrate our Independence Day. What about the small, the micro scale, not the macro scale, right? The global warfare effect. But what would happen in, if... we extrapolate the idea of, an Independence Day type attack, they probably would, attack, Australia at some point. Or it didn't even have to be, it was set in Australia, but what would happen in that rural town where the aliens landed, right? I mean, we're not seeing jet fighters and presidents and Air Force One, but we're seeing local people, fighting for their families in their town. And that's an interesting idea to me. It's basically what this film is. It's Red Dawn with aliens.
Which is a cool idea.
It's a cool idea, right? I mean, we really don't have a substitute for the Russians right now, so the aliens will do just fine. And it's an interesting idea, except that, and they had a script, they had money to, the effects are okay. You forgive them if you had a decent script, but they do not. So I mean, you can set it up, and so it's okay to sort of do Red Dawn of Aliens. That's fine if I pick that up. But if you think back to Red Dawn, I mean, the quality of the stars in that. I mean, I think it was Emilio Estevez and Patrick Swayze and not Archimedes. Jennifer Grey was in that, if I recall correctly. It was just such the characters were interesting to a degree, or interesting enough. I mean, it was basically a dumb 80s action movie, but the characters, you're invested in the character struggle to some degree because everybody's so anonymous in in Occupation. You know, you're kind of like, hang on a second, is that the main dude or is that another dude? Oh no, sorry, that's another dude. Like, I mean, I just struggle to remember who any of these people were, what their motivations were, what was going on. So essentially, Tamira Morrison, for example, half of his family were taken prisoner by the aliens, and that's kind of his motivation. The rest of them, I couldn't tell you, couldn't remember.
Does it even really matter?
It kind of set it up at the start. I mean, there's a football game, which I think, again, is an interesting setting. It's a football game, an Australian rules football game going on when the aliens come over in their ships and start fucking stuff up.
Yeah.
That's, again, a really interesting Australian flavor on that alien invasion War of the Worlds story. I liked that. But they instantly just sort of make it such a mess, that scene, and there's so many different characters with so many different things going on, different relationships, and you just haven't spent enough time with them to understand it or care. That when someone gets shot, you're like, I don't know, I don't care. I don't really remember who that guy was. So anyway.
Incidentally, the original ending for Lost in Translation was going to be the opening of an alien invasion.
I would be down with that. Like, you know, Bill would, sort of like Zombieland meets Independence Day.
We just need to make that happen.
Somehow, Occupation Rainfall, the sequel, has a 7.5 in IMDb. So
I have a feeling that that's a process of limited options kind of thing. The movie industry needs people to start going back to cinemas. Well, that's what they really want. So it's like, oh yeah, this is better than nothing, right? Right?
You're going to see if that flattens out as more people see it. The sequel has Jason Isaacs in it. So they've obviously got, I mean, I'd read that the film had done well enough on Netflix to get a reasonable budget for the sequel, and we've got,
well, it only made like $35,000 in its initial run, the first one, on a budget of $6 million.
Again, I feel like all of its success have come from Netflix.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if Netflix funded this. I don't know, and that will end up back on there as soon as they've got Ken Jeong in this as well, which is interesting for a science fiction action film. We've got Vince Colosimo, who's quite a well-known Australian actor again. I just read a story in the paper. It says I'd never heard of the first one, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'd never heard of the original Occupation. Again, you just don't see many genre films coming out of this country, and I do like to support genre films when they happen. I mean, I'm trying to think of, is it Daywalkers was probably the last one I could think of. It's going back to
Daybreakers,
and that had Ethan Hawke in it, and that was really, really good.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people didn't like it, but they're wrong.
I enjoyed it. That had Willem Dafoe in it as well. It
did, and it was done by the Spirit brothers, who also did a really good one in the early 2000s called Undead. Yeah, they also did Predestination a few years ago.
That was pretty good.
Excellent. So genre films can come out of this country if they're just a little bit rare. And unfortunately, look, if you saw the posters for the second one and go, oh, I'll go and check out the first one, be warned. It's not good. It's not good at all. It's a slog.
Yeah.
A real slog.
I'll check it out.
I'll be curious eventually. Your thoughts, because we all know I am the drunken curmudgeon of the show.
I'm the contrarian, so I'll probably like it.
Keep it interesting.
All right.
I think you mentioned you were talking about Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah. So the latest season available on Australian Netflix dropped at the beginning of this week, and I consumed all of it, even though it was a short season, which is very annoying. I hate it when they do short seasons. But it was exactly more of the season 7, and it was only 13 episodes, but it was a great thing. They're keeping the characters generally fresh by bringing them into kind of new things. Like the last episode called Lights Out is great. It's essentially a blackout in New York, and the ramifications of kind of what the police do in this comical way in the middle of Jake Peralta's character trying to get back to the precinct so that he can be there for the birth of his child. And it's just more of what you get before. So if you like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, they keep it going. But unlike so many of those comedy shows where you get like maybe 4 or 5 seasons of really good stuff, and then it just kind of goes, okay, this is boring, this is shit. You're kind of invested in the characters are developing interestingly, and they're being put into these new scenarios that are good and interesting. And there's an episode, I think it's in season 8, it's not out here yet, where Jake Peralta gets to essentially live out his Die Hard fantasy, and it's like, cool, I want to see that. So I've not really got much more to add to it beyond what I already said, but every single one of the characters just does really well, and they play with a lot of the stereotypes of a lot of action movies and action shows, and just point out the stupidity of those scenarios in good ways that just make you kind of feel like, I get that. I've watched, it could be anything from fucking Columbo to any of the Bruce Willis action movies. There's just infinite amounts of possible piss taking, and it's not parody style of Flying High, Airplane kind of things, not the Abrams kind of parody movies or anything, but it's just kind of pointing at something, going, yep, Jake Peralta loves this, he gets to do it, and it's not as good as he expected. He's seeing the obvious lie that Hollywood has presented and stuff like that, but it's done in a fun way.
I've never watched any of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. What's a comedy you might compare it to? I think Cherry's a fan. I think season 7 has just come to Netflix. Cherry, feel free to chime in with a
what would you think is a simile for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Chewy? That's a tough one. There's it's character-based comedy, kind of very, very brushing slightly with stuff like maybe Black Books, that absurdist character scenario.
So Sanato's workplace comedy.
Yeah.
Like The Office?
No, it's not like that. It's not dry comedy like The Office or anything of that ilk. It's much more obviously played for laughs. Whereas that's kind of like Office Space, kind of everyone has experienced this.
And that hasn't got that faux documentary lens.
No, not at all. This is multi-camera, not that documentary feel. It's what I'm gonna see what IMDb suggests as an alternative, because I really don't know. It's in some ways similar to like how Palm Springs is kind of like Groundhog Day, but not really. This is kind of also falls into that kind of bracket.
They're comparing it to Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and The Big Bang Theory. No,
it's not like Friends at all. Maybe a little bit of Big Bang, but no, it's
Always Sunny.
Yeah, that's probably closer. Yeah, I'd say, and maybe kind of Community. Yeah, that kind of thing it's closer to what it's like. But generally speaking, all the things that it's saying you might also like are completely wrong. They've got some really good shows in there, but
Lucifer, Black Mirror.
No, it
literally has Black Mirror in there.
Yeah, it's nothing like a Black Mirror episode. Nothing.
It's very strange. It's like an anthology series. So
yeah,
my main turnoff has always been that I don't particularly enjoy Andy Samberg's comedy. It's always very broad, very dick joke, fart joke, focused. But that said, I enjoyed him very much in Palm Springs. So
yeah, it's like it's more of the early elements of Palm Springs Andy Samberg. He doesn't have quite the level of maturity that he has in Palm Springs, so you probably get tired of it pretty quick.
I shall have to try it. Are all 7 seasons on Netflix?
Yeah. But if you don't like it after the first episode, you won't like it because it definitely hits its tone straight away, and it kind of goes, "Yep, this is what we're shooting for, and this is all that we're gonna do," and it just does that. And I think Chewie is very, very on the money, saying it's got a postmodern comedy style that's very much referential to pop culture and plays with stereotypes. That is. He's a man with words. He knows how to use words. He's got the best words. He has the best words. And yes, plenty of dick, fart, and sex jokes.
Well, I think I'm going to hate it, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's worth, I think, 22 minutes an episode, I think, is how long they run.
It's so little to choose from these days.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's just Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Did you have something else?
No, I didn't.
I would like then to transition, and I'm going to talk about something quickly.
Goodness me.
That I had a go at this week, but I didn't think I was going to finish Occupation. I got about halfway through and I said, yeah, no, I'm out. But then this afternoon I had nothing to do and I was in a bad mood and I thought, fuck it. What a perfect time to watch the second half of a movie I didn't much like the first half of.
Torture yourself properly.
Exactly. I mean, what about some more misery? That'll do a job. Sorry?
Cats?
No, goodness, no. Maybe for a dare. But that was the second half of Occupation. But yesterday evening, I thought I'd seen around some reviews and stuff for the new Amazon Prime sci-fi romance thing called Bliss, starring Owen Wilson and Salma Hayek.
Okay.
Directed by Mike Cahill, which was the one thing that interested me. He directed a film about 10 years ago called Another Earth, starring Britt Marling, I think her name was. Britt Marling, who I became a huge fan of, and I saw the next film that she did with Mike Cahill called something else, I Origins. Had Michael Pittman, which I also really, really enjoyed. So I was like, oh, well, the reviews on this aren't good, but I really enjoy Mike Cahill's previous work. I got halfway through this.
Oh, dear.
And I stopped. A mind-bending love story following Greg, who, after recently being divorced and then fired, meets the mysterious Isabel, a woman living on the streets and convinced that the polluted, broken world around them is a computer simulation. And here's to say I'm not going to go back and watch the second half because there was something a bit... Again, there was the seed of a wonderful idea in this, which I think they've completely messed up. Okay. In the sense of it has that interesting angle on that whole... a little bit. We talked a little about the 13th floor the other week. Are we living in a simulation? And Salma Hayek's character has, Owen Wilson is this utterly miserable character who works in a call center at the start of the film, despite the fact he has an office. So he must have been pretty important. But I do enjoy having been someone who worked for a lot of years in call centers once upon a time, that the go-to setting for a completely miserable workplace existence is a call center. And the call center is called Technical Difficulties. And he is called into his boss's office and fired for reasons. Not really.
We don't like your face anymore.
It's the United States, so they are allowed to do that. Chewie, that's how we used to do our movie challenges, was very drunk, when George had to watch Epic Movie and Superhero Movie and Grease 2 and I think there was another one in there. I think it might have been one of the scary movies.
I had to watch a few of the scary movies.
Alcohol was not only allowed, it was encouraged.
Yep. It was a health and safety requirement to watch some of those movies.
Hannah Montana movie, didn't watch it yourself. But they are behind us. So we see Owen get fired, and in the process of being fired, I'm sorry, spoilers here, but you trust me, I'm doing you a favor. He kills his boss and has to hide the body. And then goes across the road to a bar where he meets Salma Hayek, who somehow within about 5 minutes convinces him that they both are actually these real people living in a simulation, and that none of the people around them are actually real. They're all simulations, and that they alone have the power to control what happens in the simulation going on around them. And as the film sort of goes on, he sort of moves in with her. She lives in like a shanty under an overpass, kind of like in a homeless camp. And she's like, "Oh, I'm not homeless. I'm off the grid."
Okay.
And yeah, his sort of existence is sort of, you're like, okay, they're basically living like homeless people, but they think they're really the only real people who are living in a computer simulation.
Is it a comedy?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. I don't remember any laughs. Which is interesting for Owen Wilson, right? Because he's known for, he looks kind of bored in this film. He really seems out of place.
Okay.
Salma Hayek is also kind of miscast, I think, for at least the first half of the film made me feel that way. And it's kind of weird. You never really it's really twisted, and which is kind of, again, if you've seen anything that Mike Cahill's done before, that's kind of what he does. Another Earth, which I said was a wonderful film. This is pretty trippy. So it's kind of it's a weird, messed up kind of story. And I mean, by the end, maybe it all makes sense. But it's only an hour 43 minutes. But I'd suggest I made it to about the 50-minute mark and said, yeah, this is pretty bad. I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what it comes up at the end. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's just going to come out that he's just being a fucking junkie living on the street the whole time, and it's all been going on in his head.
It's sitting on 38 for a Metacritic score with 20 critics, so not doing well.
It's not, and I guess if you put the title of science fiction on it, you'd be like expecting, and we get to set an expectation. I mean, you're probably thinking spaceships. I guess you could file this in the more Black Mirror family of science fiction.
Yeah, it kind of sounds a little bit like Vanilla Sky kind of thing.
Yeah. But I didn't like Vanilla Sky. And it's worse than that. So, but like, I guess again, it's like you have this nugget of an idea in there. You're like, I think I can see what he's going for after 50 minutes, at least. 50 minutes worth of the idea, and you're like, that's an interesting idea, and you're exploring. I think you were trying to explore something interesting, so points for trying, but you still failed. Yeah. So look, if you're like me, and you go, hey, sci-fi, that's interesting, and you go, you Salma Hayek, Owen Wilson film. Yeah, maybe we're going back into lockdown in Melbourne. Who the fuck knows?
Please no.
You're not in Melbourne. It doesn't matter.
But I don't want to lose my job.
Well, yes, but they didn't. They kept you working there before, so fingers crossed. It's if you're looking for something to watch, and there is a sort of fairly limited choice of things at times, of new stuff that sounds interesting that you want to watch. Do not be fooled by the A-listy sort of looking cast. Regional.
It's so strange how like Amazon and Netflix and all these platforms that are creating their original content movies, they can be really cool little nugget ideas, movies just well made, or they're just utter dreck. And it seems like they haven't yet worked out a way of quality control. And I guess
I don't believe and say it doesn't matter.
That's a fair point. And especially in the current climate, but
it doesn't matter because it's not like cinema, right? Where you're competing with in normal circumstances, the new DC film, the new Marvel film, maybe a Star Wars thing, maybe a DreamWorks thing, maybe a Minions movie, I don't know. And if a reviews will come out and go, Bliss is a giant turd, and then some of your mates see it and say it's a giant turd, word of mouth and the critics' reviews, will really kill it in the cradle, right? People aren't going to go and see it when they could go and see something higher profile that's got a better review.
Yeah.
On Amazon, who reads reviews for Amazon films? Not many.
That's true.
And if your friends have seen it, the chances that they're going to tell you about it probably, again, pretty slim, because maybe they turned it off halfway through and switched on Tiger King again,
And that's going to be something that you're never going to get really on any of the streaming services, is any kind of rating system, because they are not going to want to be associated with, they've got shit movies. Look at this movie on Netflix. It's only got a 3 out of 10. It's like, no, why are you even bothering streaming that? No one's going to watch it unless it's us torturing ourselves. So it's kind of like that.
After a refund because they didn't like Bliss. So, I mean, as long as it's content, and I guess it does matter to the point where, I guess I assume there's someone at Netflix surely has a dashboard that says, a number of hours people spend watching a particular thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they want, really. And, the fact it's got 2 stars in it that people recognize is probably going to do the job.
Yeah, it's going to get enough people in the door. But,
people are just going to watch it with their foot and play on their phone for the whole thing. And then someone's going, did you watch that Salma Hayek thing yesterday? And I go, yeah, I don't remember what it was about.
Yeah, it's the same thing with all of the Adam Sandler movies. There's a small group of people that enjoy them and would just have them in the background just so that they feel like they've got company. Even if it's...
We thought 3 or 4 years ago now, that Netflix was becoming a direct-to-video, of the 21st century, and I don't think it's hurt them.
Yeah, all the streaming platforms are really kind of being hurt, and it certainly doesn't help the fact that production of new content is extremely difficult to do these days. But still, you kind of feel like, all right, I think every single one of these companies is going to be developing some kind of contingency plan should this ever happen again. Fingers crossed it doesn't, or should it just continue to get worse.
I mean, one thing I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed it as well, is there's a significantly bigger spotlight now on international content on the streaming platforms than you ever saw before. Like, it's really plugging to me like Brazilian shows and German shows and Japanese shows. And they wouldn't be on the front, the front page with big banners, 12, 18 months ago, right? They were there. If you wanted to watch Dark, it was there.
Yeah. But, just looking at the my Netflix right now, it's got trending now. You've got Space Sweepers, The Equalizer, Cobra Kai, Superstore, Legend of Korra, The Office, Bridgerton, Fate, Katherine Heigl, Firefly Lane, Big Bang Theory, Parks and Rec, Outside the Wire. It's a lot of Netflix exclusive stuff that's very international, shall we say.
And that's talking about like actual international films like Parasite, obviously kind of very high profile. But obviously Netflix makes content in a number of different countries. I don't know if they've made anything in Australia, actually, to be honest. But some of the other streaming services have. I know Stan certainly has made some Australian local content, the Romper Stomp of a TV series and that kind of thing. Now, Netflix absolutely should be forced to make content in Australia the way TV net stations are, but we'll wait and see if that ever happens. But I know they're obviously making content in other markets that are a little bit bigger than ours. But it's interesting now that I guess their actual English language content is running a bit thin. So they've kind of put a bigger focus on the stuff they've been making overseas, which maybe their English speaking market would have passed over. Yeah.
And I mentioned it last week of, more, we're probably going to see when all of those renewed shows from a year and a half, 2 years ago finally come out, like Sex Education, The Witcher, probably even stuff like The Boys on Amazon, is probably not going to be a season dump. It's going to be week to stretch it out so that they can build more because they've seen this amazing success of that water cooler moment conversation that we talked about with WandaVision being week after week. They're going to want to stretch it out as much as they can and get people talking about it, saying, oh, that was so good. I can't wait for the next episode. Get more people signing up.
And I think that's going to be the way for a while.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about? I had
nothing else. I have put my my reputation as the curmudgeon on the line. I've bitched and moaned enough tonight.
There you go. You have backed it up, sir. You backed it up. Thank you to Chewy, for Juan, for Miss Foxy for joining in on the chat. It's always nice to see people actually interacting with us, and hope we interacted back. That was good.
Distinct lack of airplane-related content this week.
Mm-hmm.
Do better next week, guys.
Yep. Although incidentally, I did talk about Airplane and Top Gun and Hot Shots with someone at work only the other day. So it's the seed has been put in. But thank you very much. This was episode 100. We talked about our latest Chain movie, which was Lost in Translation. Next week, we're going to watch Sam Raimi's 2000 classic, The Gift. We talked about episode 5 of WandaVision. Travis talked about Occupation. I just loved a little bit more of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Travis shat all over Bliss.
Someone needed to do
it. Someone's got to do it. We watch these terrible movies so you don't have to, and that's a guarantee. And probably our next T-shirt. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Stay safe. Wear a fucking mask if you're in Australia. Anywhere in the world, just wear a fucking mask. Wear it properly. Don't take it personally when someone says, oh, can you put your mask on? Just do it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Good night.